Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Township of Union, which is being held pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Law C-231, Laws of New Jersey, dated 1975. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the local source and in the Star Ledger, the newspapers of record. And notice has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building adjacent to the municipal clerk's office. Roll call.
Mr. DiGiovanni. Here. Mr. Howe is absent. Mr. Wiley is absent. Miss Alexander.
Here.
Miss Martins.
Here.
Mr. Bentavegana.
Here.
Miss Scott.
Here.
Mr. McNeil.
Here.
And Mr. Champy.
Here. There being a quorum present, this meeting is now declared open. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the May 25th and June 15th minute meetings.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as they're written, dispense with their reading.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
So moved. Mr. Manguso, are there any communications?
There are no communications, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There being no communications, our first order of business this evening is calendar number 3399, Jaeger Lumber, located at 2322 Morris Avenue, Block 3915, Lot 17.01, construct 2 storage buildings and 1 roof structure. Mr. Hale, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and board members. Great to see you all and enjoying meeting in person these days. Yes, this is an application for Jaeger Lumber, and I'm sure everyone knows they've been a staple in Union Township for years. I think Brian said in the 1930s, and he's going to give a little history of Jaeger Lumber and its presence in Union Township. We're before this board because even though it's existed there in both a retail component and the storage facility and commercial facility for many years, it technically, and our planner will address this, is not a it's not a permitted use. What we're proposing here is to the rear of the facility, because again, a lot of their business is the commercial lumber and home products, to replace some outdoor storage racks with prefabricated structures that will provide covering for the supplies, such as windows and lumber and the like. We have received the review letter from Colliers. I was kidding Mr. Hatter that I haven't seen such a short letter, I think, in 40 years. But again, we would consider a fairly straightforward application. There will be no impact on the operation of our employees, hours of operation, or otherwise with respect to Jaeger Lumber. Just makes for keeping the product that ultimately is used to construct homes and commercial properties in more secure and condition and protected from the elements. So that's an overview of what we're seeking. What I'd like to do first is to have Brian Jaeger come up and give a little bit of history and also what's proposed by way of these improvements. So, Brian, you can go up to that mic.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hale, I did mark the application as it was submitted with its supporting materials A1, and I marked A2, the site plan, as it was submitted by L2A Land Design, dated April 7th of 2022, consisting of 7 sheets. So the complete package is A2. I noted the Collier's letter of June 16th, 22, as Mr. Hale mentioned, and also any prior resolutions would remain in full force and effect, subject to being disrupted tonight through the testimony. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Pansula.
Mr. Jaeger, can you hear me? It's Rob Pansula, the Board Attorney.
Yep.
Can I ask you to swear or affirm the testimony you can provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
I swear to tell
If you could state and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation.
All right. Brian Jaeger, Bryan Jaeger.
Okay. And Mr. Jaeger, you've heard my brief opening statement. So first, give a little background of Jaeger Lumber, how long it's been in the community here. And I know we were talking just briefly about your grandfather and then your dad, and a little bit about the business.
All right. Jaeger Lumber was established in 1937. I believe it was an existing lumber yard, coal supply yard. I am the 3rd generation. My father, Lowell, retired. He appointed me in 2008 during the last recession and downturn, and then basically I've been running it ever since. We are we've evolved over time. We were a home center. We were an Ace Hardware store. That's when the lines were to the door, and it was a far more a retail establishment, but that was the 80s, early 90s. As Home Depot and Lowe's came to town, we focused our attention on the professional builder. So mostly the remodeler, because most of the homes here have, been built. There's not a lot of new land. We rarely sell to the developer, but the custom home builder, we sell kitchens, doors. We have an installation division, and we have a garage door division. So we still have probably 5% that's focused strictly on retail, but the rest is builder supply. And that's why our parking lot sadly looks empty a lot of the time, because the builders are loading up in the back, and most of our business is done as delivery. It's phone calls, it's emails, and it's delivery. Over the last 10 years, we have been modernizing all of our sites. We started with, some of the worst sites, the worst configured. Point Pleasant Beach, we had a lumber storage facility that was all wood. It was cracking, it was failing, it was falling apart. That one took us about 2.5 years to get it done, but if you want, in terms of a turnaround, it was a beautiful project. And we're using the same company, CT Darnell Construction, for these racks and buildings as well. So it's basically like an erector set that we're doing, but it allows us, nobody likes lumber yards because of bulk storage. That's why we've been zoned out of so many towns. This allows us to put a shell either around our yard, but certainly around our material, and keep it safe, keep it clean, keep it dry, which is better for everyone down the road in the construction chain.
And basically now, it's briefly explained to the board, and I know how they're stored now and the type of structure and what it's being replaced with.
So in the probably 70s and 80s, we had some cantilever racks in Union outside, and there were 3 rows of steel racks, no roofs on them. The 4th row had a roof. The 4th row still exists, and we'll get to that on the site plan. That's back against the railway, but the roof is peeling off. It's garbage. They're orange racks. They're bent. I can't source new parts for it, but it's time for a refit anyway. So we're going to modernize that. We did our Sterling and Madison stores in the last couple of years. Our Belmar facility we finished last year. And it really, what drove this to get the covered storage is the lumber in this market has always been Douglas fir, but it was a green Douglas fir, which just means it had a higher moisture content. You could keep that out in the yard. You could keep it exposed. Freight-wise, the stuff all comes from Pacific Northwest, and rail-wise, they want to ship dry lumber. And the builder wants to build with dry lumber, because that's what it's going to be when the house is sealed, so it's got less movement. Yeah, you're going to build a better house, and the product doesn't have that, maybe the mildew or the mold on the outside. So when we switched maybe 6 years ago to KD lumber, kiln dried, we had to get racks over everything. Because you can keep them in a paper wrap for a while, and you keep the open packs underneath it, but that just wasn't good enough. So that's why we've gone to more racking. One of our existing buildings in the back here in Union, it's a large one, and we keep the lumber to the exterior. Engineered lumber has become so much more a part of every home, and it's hard to get right now. So while this was always something that needed to be done, it became very apparent in the last 2 years with product availability and just the volume of business. We needed to have more on the ground, and we couldn't keep it properly. We kept some in reloads and shipped it in as needed, but this will allow us to, in the market, when the market goes down, and you probably have all read all about the lumber market lately, we could have made better buys in the winter and softened that price spike that everyone feels. We price off of our average cost, and we trend towards whichever way the market's going. If it's going up, we have to trend higher. If it's going down, we trend lower. So an increase in inventory, because now we're going to be able to store it vertically, and we'll have bulk storage buildings to keep it dry. It won't be visible to anybody unless they're walking on the rail tracks, which nobody's allowed to do, so they won't see it. But it's just going to allow us to better manage our business and keep product here. One of our new locations in Verona is a very small location, and they used to run to pick up from reloads several times a week with their own trucks. we now can store enough material in our Union facility to support them. So when they're done with a delivery, rather than going to a reload, they're going to be able to come to us in Union and backhaul it from here, where we already have it, and they can pick and choose. Rather than taking a full truckload, they can take a couple packs if necessary. But really, it's all about keeping our product the best it can be, keeping it safer. Some of the old racks they aren't safe anymore. They're old, their arms are bent, and we work around them. This is going to allow us to get rid of some of the footings that we did for the previous racks, where each upright had its own footings. We're going to, convert that to more of a slab and put the building on top of that. That's about it. But it's time. Right? And on the special order side of things, which is why we're going to do a bulk storage rather than another lumber rack, lead times, we've heard all about them. They went out to 24 weeks. Some of them came crashing down to 12 weeks. People's product came in way before they were ready for it. We are full in Union. Our special order shed is full. We have 2 extra containers for one customer because he can't take his product, and we had to store it in containers on our site. It's not just our Union facility. Our Lakewood facility is full right now. Madison is, I don't know if they're that full, but we drive so much more volume out of Lakewood and Union that it's essential that we just get ahead of the next surge.
Great. Well, great job explaining it, and we'll have our site engineer to talk about it, but I have no further questions of Mr. Jaeger at this time.
Are there any board members that would like to question Mr. Jaeger?
Yeah, I have a question. Mr. Jaeger, how many locations do you have now?
We have 8 now.
Wow.
We opened up Verona really January of last year, 21.
Is Union the biggest?
Union's the largest land-wise.
Yeah, that's what I meant,
Volume-wise, Belmar is, I don't know, 50% more volume than Union. And it's not quite half the size.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other board members with questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Will customers have access to the storage, or is it just for your employees?
No, it's for the customers. Our contractors come back to our loading docks because they don't want to pick it up off the ground. They'll load it onto their vans or trucks there. If homeowners are, their kitchens will be stored out there, they're going to have those delivered. I mean, they could pick them up if they're small pieces and parts. Most people have it delivered, but yes, the stuff in the back, if you are ordering a window, a door, it will be in one of these new buildings because our current building is full, and actually it's got some water issues now, and I'll be back in a couple of years to ask to redo that one too.
Are there any other board members with questions? Hearing none, I have to ask this question. Are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony that Mr. Jaeger has given this evening? Hearing none. Counselor?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Jaeger. I'd now like to call upon Mike Dipple, our professional engineer. Thanks, Brian.
Mr. Dipple, can you hear me? It's Rob Pansul, the Board Attorney. Can I ask you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
State and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation.
Sure. It's Michael Dipple, D-I-P-P-L-E. I am principal at L2A Land Design LLC, located at 66 Grand Avenue in Englewood, New Jersey.
Thank you.
And Mr. Dipple, I believe you have testified before this board, but if you briefly provide your credentials.
Yes, I have, and I was just here in front of the planning board maybe last month or the month before. I am a professional civil engineer in the state of New Jersey and in New York. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rutgers University. I am in my 31st year doing this, and I've appeared in front of this board many times. I would say the last time.
We'll accept his credentials.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right. Mr. Dipple, you're obviously well familiar with the site and having worked with Brian and his crew on designing and laying and the layout. So if you could take the board through the site plan that you prepared, and again, the comments from Colliers are very limited, but just give an explanation as to the location of the existing structures, and that's what's proposed by way of improvements.
Sure. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with the site along Morris Avenue, but I'll just give you some orientation. So when you come upon the site, as Mr. Jager mentioned, you can see the main retail building, which is kind of front and center, and I'm having a little trouble, but on the screen that I'm showing there. Then you have a number of accessory buildings. You have their kitchens and windows and doors building, I'll call it, and that is along the top of the page there. Let me just get my orientation. We'll call that west. We'll call north to the right. Morris Avenue goes east-west. So we'll say to the west, along the western property line, you have that kitchens, buildings, and doors. You have another accessory building, which I think is somewhat nondescript, but that's on the northeast corner of the building, of the facility rather. And as you go to the back, you have some existing racking and a canopy over top of the racking, kind of in the middle of the site. And I'm referring to the existing racking there on the screen as I'm zooming in. And then we have the three proposed buildings that I'll get to in a second. The site's about 6.15 acres, I believe. It goes all the way to the rear as it comes to a point as you go all the way to the south. It exists along the railroad line, which travels in a north-south direction. To the west is all commercial property. The very back of the site does border residential beyond the railroad tracks, but again, that's not really close to where the proposed structures are to be located. It's all the way in the rear. So that's existing conditions, and then perhaps I can just go through the proposed. You heard Mr. Jager talk about the three buildings. They will be three different buildings. I'm going to start on the bottom, and I'm going to say that that is the most enclosed building. That is the largest one. It's 220. It's about 9,000 square feet, 220 some feet long, and it will be more of a full enclosure, but it's open on the west side. And I do have, I'm going to flip through the pages and I'm going to get to images of these buildings. Then you have one in the middle, which is more of a traditional rack with a canopy. I would say that if I had to compare that to something that I'm sure we've all seen those types of buildings, they have the arms coming out on the sides like a tree, and then you have the canopy over the top of it. So the Jager lumber operation can stack lumber and supplies along those racks, and that's what Mr. Jager was talking about with the arms being broken on the old ones. This would be kind of that tree with the limbs so that they can stack lumber and supplies on that. And you can see here, if I zoom in, there are existing racks, and I'm showing those to be removed. There's 1, 2, 3 that are coincident with the proposed buildings. And then if I move to the top, that also has a canopy over the top, and I'll show you what that looks like. That's about just under 4,000 square feet, about 140 feet long, same as the one in the middle. So that's it, and the purpose of which you've heard from Mr. Jager. He can tell the story better than anyone. It's really a modernization to help the product, to give the product a longer life, to get the product to the customer, make it easier for the customer to pick the product as they come in. That being said, Steve, I'm just going to move on to sheet 2.
Great, thanks.
And that is just to ensure not only the board, but Mr. Jager, that we're positioning these structures in a way that the customers who come in or the loading comes in and can drop the product and not be a problem. So, we want these racks very close to the back of the store, so that people aren't going a long way to get the lumber and traversing throughout the site. So they chose the central area of the site in order to do that. And we position these buildings to ensure that the truck could get around. We work with the manufacturer to make sure we have the buildings of a correct size. So that sheet 2 only depicts how a truck of that size, and it might be a lumber truck, so it might be a flatbed. I'm only depicting a truck of that size because that's what the model gives me, but it could be a flatbed truck with lumber. It could be supplies that come, kitchens and doors and things like that, which could come in a truck that looks like that. So that would be the circulation plan. So now if I go to sheet CO3, I believe I'm on, this is the largest building, and I said that this one looks most like a building, in fact, an accessory structure. So if you look at the front of the building, that would look something like that with the doors and the open area to the right. And then in the back, it would really be kind of solid. And then if you look at the side elevations, it has that sloping roof and then the overhang. And so that's the largest building closest to the railroad tracks. If I go to the next page, just bear with me, this is the rack that's in the center, and if I zoom in on this image over here, I think anyone who's been to a lumber yard would say that, yeah, I've seen something, I'm sorry. I think I went to the next page, but would say, yes, I've seen something like that. That is a traditional lumber rack with an overhang, okay, with a canopy over the top. And then if I go on to the final one, this is the proposed structure, which is furthest from the railroad track, furthest west, and that would be enclosed on a number of sides. We work with the manufacturer on that, and some of the walls are shown here, the end walls, and that can be accessed on either side. And here's a section of that on the side, and it looks like just a slice through the building itself. So that's what we're talking about. It's 3 buildings right in the middle of the site. The site works still. There's not a lot of impact to anything. There are racks out there now. I should say, if I go back to sheet number 2, which was my site plan, there is an existing building along the railroad tracks. Mr. Jaeger alluded to it. So this largest building would replace that building. He said it's falling down, the roof is coming down. This is a modernization, and if anything, it's a vast improvement. I think that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Dipple. No further questions?
Are there any board members that would like to question the testimony of Mr. Dipple?
I have a question concerning the flow of the vehicles. Is that going to be two-way traffic, or are they going to come in one way, circle around, and back out, or will they be going in both directions?
Well, I think it's a bit of this area is kind of be maintained by the Jaeger staff to make sure that things flow in the right direction. I think what we were trying to show is that the product can come in and it's comfortable and we can make it work. So on this depiction, I was trying to also ensure for our own benefit, for Mr. Jaeger's benefit, and for everyone who designs the site, that this would work, because if you can see, there's a building corner right here. I'm sorry, I'm not zooming well, but there's a building corner here where it says 1-story frame. There's a structure, so that guy has to get in and go around. But I would say that, I think Mr. Jaeger would tell you that if you're going for the kitchen or if you're going for this product, they might direct you over here and say, here, come this way. You can put your vehicle right there. There's no one coming in this way, and that's the best way to load. So, yes, I think it would be essentially a number of...
Can I jump in?
Yep.
Okay.
Just come up to the mic and...
The diagram for the flow is really, that is for the trucks, the delivery trucks coming in, the largest trucks. They are going to have one path in, they're going to go straight back. They may go straight back around that other shed and then come back out. They're not going 2 ways. It's just, that would not work for our operation. Our forklifts will go 2 ways. Some of the pickup trucks, the customers that are doing small pickups can go more than one way. But as they come in now, they come in that way. They back up to that little rectangle. I don't know if I can put a cursor on there, but I'm not going to mess with this computer. But they back into that loading dock now, and that goes into that smaller building. So, I mean, it's just not practical for them to go any other way. And it will make it safer because it'll be more established, and we have already repaved certain the areas just to kind of make it a clean runway for everyone to flow in. Does that answer the question properly, or?
Well, I mean, the concern for me is that you'll be mixing, deliveries with customers and maybe a little pickup truck or.
So most of our deliveries, now I have to kind of touch the screen and hopefully move it properly. So this building here, that's our main store. The store is probably the front third. The back 2/3 is now a drive-through warehouse. So the retail is going to go through that warehouse. Almost everything you're going to pick up to 16 foot, you're pulling from there. The long lanes are in the back. And that's the stuff that we just have to deliver. No one can really take that. You don't want them taking it. A red flag only goes so far. But, and that's just, it's going to allow us to operate more efficiently and better serve our customers, really.
Just to be clear, too, based on the Collier's review, and I think the testimony, to the extent the board has further questions, it's a technical expansion, that's why they're here, but in reality, they're enclosing existing operations, so it's not really expanding or changing anything that they're doing now, it's just improving it. So there's not an intent that you're going to get an influx of additional patrons, it's just to satisfy what is the existing operation. So Colliers makes that point too. I think it's a key point. Just so, even though we're calling an expansion, that's legalese. Technically, it's just a modernization, I think, is the way it was characterized, and an improvement. So that's something to keep in mind for the board and for the public as well.
Thank you, Mr. Pansolo.
Are there any board members with additional questions? Hearing none. At this time, are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony Mr. Dipple has given this evening?
Steve, just for the record, too, I know we mentioned Colliers, and there are limited, I agree, it's a very short letter, but there's no problem complying with the structural details that they are recommending.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes, we did receive that, and it's item 2.2, prior to issuance any building permits. We'll submit all relevant structural details and calculations, and we did review that with Mr. Jager, and he's well aware of that, and no problem that being a condition of any approval.
I'll note that for the record as well. And as the board is fully aware, once that happens and you do these pre-permit meetings with engineering and building, a lot of recommendations could come up that don't necessarily require approvals here tonight, but you might see things that come up that the applicant will satisfy through the township's recommendations because they're working cooperatively to have the site user-friendly.
Thank you.
Since there are no comments by the public, would
Yep.
you like to
I'd like to
proceed?
now call upon our professional planner, Alexander Doherty.
Can I ask you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes. Yes,
If you could state and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation.
Alexander Dougherty, last name is Dougherty, principal at Dougherty Planning and Development, 54 Main Street, Chatham.
Okay. And Mr. Doherty, I believe that you were here with us not that long ago. It might have been the planning board, but if you could briefly give the board your credentials.
I'm a licensed professional planner in New Jersey. License is good. Current standings, PP, AICP, certification. Education is out of Rutgers, Blousey, Masters in City and Regional Planning, and concentration development, redevelopment studies, and certification in public policies.
We'll accept this credential.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Doherty, if you could please give the board the benefit of the planning justification for the variance and the reason that we're before this board.
Certainly. We're here before the board tonight on a technicality for a D2, an expansion of pre-existing non-conforming use, as we just heard. And to satisfy that, I will walk the board through some of the criteria needed, as well as some exhibits I prepared for some orientation of the site that's a little over 6 acres in size.
Great.
So this screen here, 23 slides, and I do apologize, it's a pretty big site. First is just indication.
And let me just interrupt.
Yeah.
Perhaps, do you want to mark this as one One exhibit?
Yeah, why don't we do a planner's exhibit A3 consisting of, you said 23 sheets?
Yeah, we'll breeze through these.
Yeah,
It's mainly
A3.
maps and photos.
Great, sorry for interrupting, Alex. Yep.
So slide 1 here, outlined in red, is the site in question. As I stated before, it's a little over 6 acres in size. This is block 3915, and we have essentially two lots, 17.01, and the little one hanging off to the side is lot 13. The use in question will be predominantly here on 17.01, the main site. We go to, is it 1, 2? Yeah, 2. More of an aerial view, as you see from the bird's eye view. This slide number 3 has the land use map from the Union here. Gray out is the zone we're in, the I-40 zone, the IO-40 zone, and the red outline again is the site in question. And as we can see, abutting next to that is the once railroad tracks running against the site. 4, we have your land use map, again, up in the green arrow pointing to it, red kind of gives you a feel for the character and the uses here. Sites identified as commercial. We do offer that retail component here, is a mix of a commercial industrial feel, if you will. And I think that's important to note as I went through the master plan on page 64 here for what the City of Union envisions. The blue area, the powder blue, if you will, or this zoom in on that, your master plan envisions this area as a commercial industrial, and I think that's exactly what we have before you tonight. And I really do think that's an important component here, given the master plan for the area. This is more of photos orientating ourselves around the site, ground view of the site in question. And as we take the drone up a little higher, circulates around, we can start to see what's behind the main structure that contractors and/or public would come and see. And this is the area that we're looking to improve. As we can see, the racks on the ground, the lumber is just kind of stored. The one on the side is the rack, and then we have the larger facility behind it. I think what's important to note is the proportional size to some of these flatbed trucks and how they're maneuvering now. We're essentially asking the board to cover some of the racks that we have, replace the existing one, and put the other ones in some kind of enclosed shelter. So with that being said, the next couple photos are just spinning the drone around, showing what's there from different angles to really give a feel for what's out there. And then the larger facility in the back from different angles. And then we'll start to show that other piece hanging off to the side that's really not in use for the lumber facility. And that's just from the front, if you will, off of Rollway. And then we kind of take it further in the back. And right here, I'd like to point out to the board the buffering we have from that residential component. As we can see on this slide here, the first slide, we have some fairly large trees, if you will, and the site next to us, contaminated. It's still pretty spacious. The use is certainly compatible here. Sorry, to zoom out. Then as we come to the next slide, we do have this large band of dense forest, if you will, that kind of abuts the residential structure. And again, what's important to note is it's orientated behind where this use would be. And then, whoops, I went to the next one. I lost it. Sorry, guys. And then this last photo on the bottom here on the left shows the green belt, if you will, bordering where their old railroad tracks were. And then the last one on the bottom right here kind of really shows the topography of the hill and just how far those residential houses are to the rear of the site. And what's important to note is they do have that 6-foot wooden fence, and they're pretty spacious from the site itself. And again, to emphasize, the use in question is not located all the way to the rear. It's more up front or in the middle, if you will. And these next photos is really just give a flavor of what's out here on Morse Ave. We have the office mixed-use component across the street. We have the Learning Center to the left. We have the CVS a little bit towards the right at the intersection. We have over there as well the Aldi's food store, TD Bank, a 7-Eleven. The bottom right is our neighboring site. And Coming back towards us on our side of the street, across from Rawways, the BP, we have a dental office, and then kind of going down Rawway, we have some more compatible uses abutting us. And again, I'd like to point out that we have a large 6-foot wooden fence with some plantings along Rawway. We do have our neighbors as a buffer here, but, in case, for a negative impact, if you will, there is that fence and some foliage there. We have a handful of multifamily houses that do face Rawway, again, right in front of that wooden fence. As we go back towards our side of the street, we have some automotive and some more industrial tech support, if you will, and all tools and so forth. And the houses that are a little bit further down, they do not orientate the face of their structures on Rawway. They're more on the side street, if you will. So with that being said, I'll jump into some of the testimony here. The I-040 zone is the industrial office district. So we have that industrial feel, if you will. It's not necessarily an office. With that being said, this use is not expressly called out to be allowed in here, so it's that pre-existing non-conforming use. So we have that D2. We do have some existing relief, if you will. These are pre-existing conditions. We're altering one of the buildings as it is for the storage. We are certainly in compliance with our rear yard setback, as we talked about in the rear, maximum building coverage at 60% versus the 27.8 that exists on the site. Maximum impervious surfaces at 80%. We will be at 60.9. So we're substantially under at with these improvements. When we look at the positive here, the project as a whole will result in site betterment visually and functionally. So for the legal relief, for the statutory D2 relief, it's more relaxed than the D1. The essence of the D2 is site betterment, and I think that's exactly what we're doing here. So we have visually, its new architectural features will give the site a fresh new look and revitalize its image with the public. At the same time, functionally, it enhances the layout, which results in a better site organization, flow, and quality of product. Essentially, it's just quality control. It's not just for the company itself, but for the community and the customer base. These products go directly to the general population. So with that being said, the addition to the project, the additional project will square off the outside storage, improving the interior with vertical, more efficient storage and site layout. The project advances the core goals of planning purposes for efficient land use, variety of land uses. All the above promote purposes of the municipal land use law, purpose A, G, I, and M. When we look at the negative criteria, relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public or the impairment to the zone. In fact, we're actually ahead of where Union envisions this zone. The expert witness swore under oath that the site will function safely and efficiently. The big tractor layout is for deliveries and shipments. As we saw, the lumber is substantially large, probably larger than this pew seat. So it's not something the consumer will necessarily have to go back and have conflicts with those tractor trailers. And then we look at the lumberyard is compatible with the character of the area and will improve the site integration for future retail and consumer base as the envision for the zone. The only reason for the relief, as stated before, is technical, as the master plan envisions this area as a commercial industrial use. The industrial and retail uses can coexist without interfering with each other in any adverse manner that would have a detrimental impact to the public. And when we look at the C relief is justified under the C1 or the C2. To pass the test, either the C1 or the C2 need to be met, not both, but in essence, for the C2, granting us relief from these side yard setbacks and so forth will give us a better product overall for the site. The C1, these are existing conditions unique to the site, unique with the structure on the side yard setback. If we look at Jaeger from the front, a lot of the side yard relief we're seeking here before you pertain to these buildings that are basically built to the property line themselves. With that being said, I'll kind of conclude here for the negative criteria that relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the area of the zone plan. The structures enclose what is now an unprotected open air and exposed material product to the environment. This improves the quality of building materials used and sold to the public, which is paramount to public safety, morals, and the general welfare. The structure also serves as site betterment that blocks and cleans up an unsightly materials from our neighbors that can see it. The overall lot coverage is still well below the zoning threshold. The structures are going in an area that already serves its intended function, within the site's general operations. I'll conclude, the application represents a positive adaptive reuse of an existing site with minimal, if any, impacts, and the statutory criteria for grant of relief has been met and approval is warranted.
Great job. Thank you, Alex. I have no further questions at this time.
Are there any board members that would like to question Mr. Doherty's testimony? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony that Mr. Doherty has given? Hearing none, Counselor, would you like to?
We have no further witnesses at this time. Obviously, the witnesses that are here this evening are here if there's any further questions or comments from the board.
No. Are there any, I have none. Are there any members that would like to comment on this application? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this application? Hearing none, Counselor, would you like to
Yes,
sum up?
I'll briefly sum up. I think this is a great project and improvement for a business that's been in Union Township for decades. Jaeger Lumber, again, is an important business member of the community, and what's been proposed here, and aptly stated by Mr. Pansula, we're just replacing basically exposed racks for the product and enclosing them. Be no essence change in the operation, hours of operation, intensity of the facility at all, and we think this is positive, and certainly based upon the testimony of Mr. Jaeger, Mr. Dipple, and the planning testimony of Mr. Doherty, we request that the board grant this relief. And thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. At this time, I believe we can conference this. Mr. DiGiovanni, would you like to begin?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chairman. As was stated before, this is a very simple application. We're just enclosing some racks that are already there to make the business run a little more efficiently. I don't think it's a change in the way the business is being run, no change in the hours, no change in the employees. I think it's just an improvement all over. I don't have any problem with it. I'll approve it.
Mr. Bentavaglia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a pretty straightforward application. I see no negative impact. Like Mr. DiGiovanni said, there's nothing changed in the business. I'm going to vote yes tonight.
Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no objection to this applicant. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be an improvement to the public, particularly to his patrons. They'll get a better product because it's being stored in a better position. So I will vote yes on this application.
Ms. Martins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on the testimony provided today, this is a positive improvement, and it's not a negative improvement to the site, so I will be voting yes.
Ms. McNeil. Excuse me. Ms. Scott, I'm so sorry.
I thought the application was very clean, and I also think to make a lumber yard aesthetically pleasing is a plus. It's not something that you always say. And I also think the business model was very efficient. The fact that you're not just looking out for your business, but you're also looking out for the consumers, giving them a better product, trying to protect the product, I thought was a good idea. And the fact that you're getting out in front of it because of the market trends and that you want it to be out there so that you don't, you're not in a situation where now you're waiting for lumber. So I thought it was an overall good plan. I thought all the experts did a good job. And I've been here since 1930, that kind of improvement might give you another 30 years. So I would be doing it.
Ms. Alexander.
I agree with my colleagues. I think the three of you defended the application very, very well. And like they say, you have been here since 1937. It is a site betterment. Union is always worried about the traffic, so there's no increase in the traffic flow. And today I learned a lot. Mr. Yeager, I learned about Douglas fir and KD. So you need the area to take care of that KD wood so that it won't warp. And I think that, the customers will be happy, and I'm very pleased with the application. I'll be voting yes on this application.
As for myself, based on the proposed plans and testimony, the variance, actually it's one variance, requested will not have a negative impact on the property or neighboring property owners. It's basically a good, clean application, and I wish Mr. Jaeger well on his new endeavor and the proposed additions. which will enhance and improve his business operations. To be in business over 80 years says a lot. So I, too, will vote yes for this application. May I have a motion to grant the application?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the variance applicable to this application and that council is directed to prepare a resolution consistent with the board's decision.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Mangusa?
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Yes.
Ms. Alexander?
Yes,
Ms. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Bentavegna?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
And Mr. Champy?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Truly appreciate your time and consideration this evening. Yeah, it wouldn't be nice if they're here for another more and more decades, so.
July 27th meeting, Steve? There's
That's
nothing on the
fine.
20th, so I'll do it on the 27th.
Mr. Chairman, there being no further business before this evening, I move we adjourn.
a second. Aye.
All right.
So moved.